door of his house. The man was so excited, he said, Jesus, come into my house. Come, stay with me. I've got this beautiful big house. In fact, Jesus, I'll give you the master bedroom. It's my room. It's the one upstairs. It's got the beautiful view of the whole region. You can see the lakes, you can see the rivers, you can see the mountains, you can see the village, and you can see the whole thing. It's so beautiful. And do you know what Jesus said to the man? Thank you very much. And so he comes and lives in the man's house. And he begins to live together with this man, and the man was so happy that he had Jesus living inside of his house. And he began to make dinner for Jesus that evening. Together they sat down and they talked and they learnt so much, and it was incredible. It gets to the night time and Jesus says, good night. He goes up and he goes to bed peacefully. The man sitting down on his lovely sofa says to himself, oh, I've done a really good thing today. I've got Jesus living in my house. But he hears another knock. The man was so happy. He got up. He went to the door and he opened it up. And do you know who the man found there? Let me give you a hint. Who was it? It was the devil. The man looked at the devil. The devil immediately came into the man's house and they began to wrestle all night long. The devil would strike the man and beat him up, and that would cause a huge mess all over the house, and the sun would begin to rise, and the devil would sneak out the back door and run away. Jesus would come down. And the man looked at Jesus, and it was in that moment he remembered. That's right. Jesus is living in my house. Wasn't he meant to help me with this devil? He looked at Jesus and said, Jesus, aren't you supposed to help me with this devil? And Jesus looks at the man with kindness and compassion in his heart. He said, I'm so sorry, sir. But you see, you have such a large house. There's so many rooms, and you've only given me one room in this big house. And it's a room that's upstairs. The man says, oh yeah, that's true. And he thinks about it for a little bit, and he says, hey, Jesus, I've got a great idea. How about this? There's 10 rooms in this house. There's 5 upstairs and there's 5 downstairs. How about I give you half of my house? I'll give you all of upstairs and I'll keep downstairs. You know what Jesus says? Thank you very much. You know, Jesus isn't going to force himself upon you. He will take what you give him. And so, in that space, the man says, I've done a great thing, I feel good. They get to the end of the day. Jesus says, good night, and goes to bed. The man, feeling good about himself once more, hears a knock at the door. He gets up. But this time, he's a little bit more wise. So he has one of those old chains, those big thick chains, that he puts onto the lock to the door. And so he goes to the door and he puts the chain on, and he opens the door to take a quick look outside. Do you know who he saw? Who did he see?
Satan.
He saw the devil. In that moment, the devil knew. He reached in and he broke those chains with a bolt cutter. He pushed the door open and he was fighting with that man all night long again. They wrestled backwards and forwards. The man was getting so beaten up, he was so tired. The sun rises, the devil flees out the back once more. Jesus comes downstairs. And the man, this time, is a little bit angry. Have you ever gotten angry with God? Anyone here ever gotten angry with God? I was a little bit angry. This man was a little bit angry. He turned to Jesus and was like, Jesus! I've given you half my house! he says, I'm sorry, sir. But you see, this is such a large house. And I'm upstairs, but you're downstairs. Like, you still have half the house. And the man breathes deeply and is like, you know what? That's true. And he thinks about it long and hard. And he says, how about this, Jesus? I'm going to give you all the house. But one room. See, I need a room to sleep in. It's a small room. It's got all the nasty paperwork. You don't want to deal with the bills. You don't want to deal with these other things. You know, it's a room that adult things happen in the room. You don't want to be in that room, Jesus. It's a little bit messy. Like, seriously. You know what Jesus says? Thank you very much. The man, thinking he's done a good thing, feels very proud of himself. He's given so much of himself to Jesus. In that moment, they're fixing up the house and making things look all pretty again. They finish up. Jesus says good night once more and he goes and lies down. The man, again, has found himself relaxing on a lazy boy. Legs kicked up, feeling great. He hears a sound. He is so done with this. He hops up, he goes to the door. And he goes to look at what's going on outside. Do you know what he sees? Nothing. He forgot to close the back door. The devil comes in and he's found himself fighting with the man all night long once more. And they fought all night. And the devil comes to the man and he's telling him about all of his past, about all of the things that he was, all the things that he used to be, all the sins that he committed. He was pouring guilt and condemnation all over this man. This man was just tired, and when he finally was giving up and he was beaten, he was on the ground, do you know what the devil does? He kicks him while he's down. You know, he doesn't stop. He doesn't play fair. The sun begins to rise and the devil sneaks out the back. Jesus comes down. He looks at the man who's beaten, who's broken on the floor, and his heart's crying with compassion. And the man looks back to Jesus. And he's just like, Jesus, what must I do to stop this suffering? What do I have to give? What do I need to do to have this problem dealt with? I'm so sick and tired of this, God. What do I have to do? Jesus thinks about it. And then he looks at the man and says this. How about this? You sign over the deed of your house to me, and so then it's my house. And I will own this house. And I will give you one of the rooms in it so that you can live in my house. And the man thinks about it. He goes to the dark room and he opens the door and he rustles through the paperwork and he pulls out the deed. He signs it, hands it over to Jesus, and gives him the keys. He's so tired from the battling all night long that he's just lying there on the sofa and Jesus is there fixing up the whole house. Some people would say that he rebuilt the whole thing, that he made it brand new. It gets to the end of the day and the man, he hears something. The man hops up. He starts walking to the door. He has done this for the last 3 nights. He hasn't had sleep. His knees are shaking. His arms are quivering and he's just ready to give in. And he reaches out to grab the door handle. And then he feels something. A hand grabs him on the shoulder. It was Jesus. And Jesus turns the man around and says, "Excuse me, sir. I believe this is my house. And as the owner of this house, I am the protector of this house. Who of you know that Jesus is righteous? And the righteous are as bold as lions, and Jesus isn't afraid of no devil. And so Jesus goes to the door, and he throws that door open, and do you know who he found? Who did he find? He found the devil. The devil looks at Jesus. He looks at the house.